In response to the coronavirus, President Trump is calling for critical medical supplies and pharmaceuticals to be made stateside. The administration is expected to move forward with an executive order requiring federal agencies to increase purchases of American-made medical goods, including PPE and medicines, in order to encourage more domestic production, bringing it out of China back here in the States. Joining us now to discuss is Mattie Duppler. She's a senior fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and president of Forward Strategies. Mattie, thanks so much for coming on. Let's have a little chit-chat here. I understand that you may disagree with this. You may think that we should still have things made in China.
Well, it's not just that we should have things made in China. It's that we should have a global supply chain that allows U.S. manufacturers to continue the production of important things here. I mean, things like drugs, PPE, of course, have been the center of the attention when it comes to trade negotiations over the last few months. But if you look over the past few years and past few decades, the expansion of global supply chains has allowed for more manufacturing here in the United States, more jobs here in the United States, and more ability for consumers to buy the things they need here in the United States. Restricting trade and creating more barriers is going to necessarily reduce the amount of opportunity that American consumers have to get the things that they need. So I think it's very troublesome that the administration might be considering a Buy America order, whether it's just for federal agencies or a larger Buy American order that would restrict the ability of U.S. manufacturers to source their supplies elsewhere in the world, would really create a bottleneck for resources that Americans need here.
Well, now is the time that we're so dependent on China. That seems to be what's in the headlines, right? We're so dependent on China at this time, and we can't really depend on what the Communist Party is saying there in China. Pulling out there only seems like the only way to gain our independence back as a country. Your thoughts?
Well, there's a couple things that I would point out. One is that our dependence on China, particularly when it comes to drugs, has been completely overstated. In fact, we don't actually know exactly where all of our drugs are produced because the FDA doesn't track that information. We simply know where there are facilities that produce ingredients that U.S. manufacturers need and use to produce drugs here. So of that data, we know only 13% or so of the facilities used to create those drugs are in China. So that's a much further cry from being completely reliant on China. But secondly, when you're talking about those supply chains and talking about the needs of Americans to get those drugs, if you cut off supply chains, if you cut off the ability of U.S. manufacturers to get ingredients they need for drugs elsewhere in the world, that could prompt retaliation from other trading partners. That will necessarily restrict the amount of things that we can import here. It will also restrict what we can export. I mean,
well, Mattie, let me jump in really quick because you brought up a good point about the 13%, because I read this as well. And then also, we don't really know where they're all made of, what you just said there.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it be nice if we did know, and it was all right here in the States, under our federal regulations, under our laws here, under our safety production?
I mean, listen, if it was cheap and effective to produce everything that we need here, we would do it, and U.S. drug companies would do it. But the fact of the matter is that it's too expensive, and producing everything here would make drugs cost prohibitive for American consumers. Now, the CARES Act that was passed by Congress in April pretty much admits this problem. It says, listen, we need to start studying this and direct HHS to start looking at where our drugs are coming from. We need that data first before we can make any kind of assessment about what it would look like to have drugs made here. But there's going to be a significant cost with that. If the administration really is dedicated to try and get drug production increased here, what they need to do is looking at reducing barriers and reducing costs for U.S. manufacturers to be able to produce those drugs here, rather than creating more barriers and increasing costs, which ultimately will impact the American consumer.
Well, look, I mean, you're going to have a little bit of trouble with the Green New Deal people out there, because you're going to have to add the petroleum for those global supply chains, for those ships to come in. That's a whole other argument in itself.
That's exactly right. And that just points to the point that I'm trying to make, which is that the expansion of global trade on net has been extremely good, not just for Americans, but for the human race. It's allowed for the proliferation of not just capitalism, but also the trade of goods that people need. The United States is very good at a number of different things. We don't need to be making our drugs here. Every step of the process doesn't need to be domiciled here in order for us to be able to access the things that we need. I'm not saying that we shouldn't hold China accountable, particularly when it comes comes to their role that they played in the pandemic, but reducing the amount of opportunity that we have to increase resources that the American population needs is not the way to go about it.
I always enjoy a healthy discussion and hearing from the other side, and very respectfully done. I appreciate that. Mattie Duppler, Senior Fellow at the National Taxpayers Union and President of Forward Strategies. Of course. Thank you.